Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Salt and Light podcast. I am really excited for today's conversation because it's close to home, quite literally. My guest today is someone I deeply respect, not just for what he has done, but for who he is. Phill Moon is a founding head teacher of Bradford Christian School, where my own daughter studies, and where I had the privilege of seeing firsthand the impact of his work on students and families. In this episode, we talk about education, faith, and challenges of raising children in today's culture. We will explore the story behind the school, the heart behind Christian education, and how parents and churches can respond to the pressing issues of our time, from gender identity, peer pressure, to declining moral values. This one is full of wisdom, practical insight, and personal reflection. And I really think you will walk away encouraged and better equipped. So grab a coffee, settle in, and let's jump in. Phill, welcome to the Salt and Light podcast.
Thank you.
And it is great privilege to have you here. It was to give you a background. After my couple of episodes, somebody reached out to me saying that you should definitely get somebody who could give their insights on parenting and education from a Christian perspective. And I was wondering, I don't know anybody whom I could call like that. And one day when I was dropping my daughter to school, Bradford Christian School, which you founded,
hmm
and that's when it dawned on me when I saw Lydia. Like, it dawned on me that well, I could talk to you, uh, and that's where this all started. So thank you so much for agreeing to it. Um, let's start with a brief introduction. What do you do currently? What is your background in the education?
Yeah.
And like and probably to start with, how did you become a Christian at the first place?
Mm. Okay. Well, I didn't grow up in a Christian family. I grew up in a really good family, really loving family. But my neighbor was a Christian when I was 15. Um, I grew up in an RAF family, so neighbors changed all the time, and we never stayed more than 2 or 3 years in one place. So my neighbor at one point was a Christian, a few years older than me, invited me to a concert. I heard the gospel, and without seeking or asking questions, I just responded to the gospel the first time I heard it. I always wanted to be a teacher, so I came to Bradford to train to become a teacher, and I have lived and worked in Bradford ever since. I married a Bradford girl, and we've lived in Bradford ever since. So I've worked in 3 or 4 Bradford schools before I founded Bradford Christian School in 1993.
So, what prompted you to start a school? And people become engineers or doctors
Yeah.
or sports person. A school?
Well, yeah. I mean, as I say, I always just wanted to be a teacher, and maybe a week or two into my first job, I realized that God had really called me to work with children and maybe teach them a subject I had a passion for, but it was all about working with children. So I worked in a big comprehensive in Bradford. I then worked in what was called a language centre at the time, when people came over from the Indian subcontinent, no working English, so they came to the language centre for maybe 2 terms or up to 2 years. When they had a working English vocabulary, they went into mainstream schools. But I think it was when I became a parent that I really began to think about Christian education and the content of education. And so when our children were really young, my wife, who also is a teacher, she started First Steps Christian Preschool, and that ran for 2 or 3 years. And that was based on a YWAM syllabus that YWAM had developed from the University of the Nations in Hawaii. And then when our children began to be of the age to go through into schooling, um, yeah, I worked with a group of people for about 2 years, and we thought through what would Christian education look like? What would a school look like? And then we opened the school in 1993.
So, what was a practical process in the sense that uh, was government very supportive of this, or do you had to face opposition in the sense that why do you want to open a Christian school? What
Yeah,
difference it makes?
yeah. Well, I have a lot of admiration for my colleagues in teaching. I've worked with some really inspirational teachers that have helped me, shaped me from all sorts of backgrounds. You'll never hear me running down schools. It's a really challenging job, and the government has never supported our schools, and sometimes have been through one means or another difficult to work with. But I've always believed that what we are doing with our Christian schools is not divisive, in as much as Bradford Christian School is open to parents who want a faith-based education, and we have all sorts of parents, some not from faith backgrounds, but they just want the values that we teach. And we have a working relationship with Bradford Council with the autism provision. I've always believed that we can contribute to good citizens of the UK. So I've never felt that we are needing to hide away, do something kind of covert. Let's just provide an alternative way of educating children that's based on faith. So even though it's never been easy, there's been all sorts of opposition, sometimes from people you wouldn't expect to be opposing you within the Christian faith. And because God called us, and I know I was called, which is always good when it goes hard, when it's difficult, because you realize, well, God, you called me to do this. What's the answer? How do I persevere? How do I carry on? How do I have an attitude that is helpful, to outward looking outwards. So, yeah. So it was easier in 1993 than it is to start school now. We got a group of people. Began going around Bradford to share the vision. Whoever would put us up, give us 10 minutes, put on a meeting, make us welcome. So I took a year to go around the churches in the city, and from that, the first set of teachers came together, the first set of governors came together, the first set of families came together. So we started with about maybe 17 families and about 37 children. And we started in the porter cabins that you see every time you go and take Elisa to school. And then in 2002, we moved down to the site where we are now. But there was no funding. It was about trying to articulate what a Christ-centered curriculum would look like, what bringing children up in a different kind of education might look like. And over the years, we've been able to clarify and refine what those kind of things might look like. So if you like, I could, if you just don't mind me looking down at my notes. So really, it all came together when we had our own children. We had 3 children, really, quite quickly. Now they are 40, 39, and 37. So, at the time they were 7 and 6 and 5 when we started the school. And if God has a plan for your life, then maybe your education should fit you for it. And we wanted to provide an opportunity for discipleship from an early age. We wanted to build a Christian mindset and worldview rather than an individualistic, consumer, materialistic, self-centered worldview. We wanted to build an ark where people could come and their children could be safe, but it would be a vibrant Christian community. We wanted to raise servant rulers, so children that had a desire to look outwards and serve, not just meet their own needs. We wanted to challenge a secular worldview, display an attractive alternative in pretty much the same way that when the Queen of Sheba visited Solomon, she said, I've heard about you now, but I've seen with my own eyes. And the Bible says she came with hard questions and she asked them until there was no spirit left in her. And Solomon was able to answer her questions. And she said, I've looked around at how you run your community and how your people go up to worship, and even your apparel, what they wear and how you do things. And my conclusion is, happy are your people. So wanted to add to the debate of what education could look like in the 20th, 21st century in Bradford, and to really make what children were experiencing at home and church and school a little bit more joined up. And so, that there was continuity of a view of life being shaped. And so, those were what motivated us in the early days and our children. I was really happily involved working in Bradford. I worked in Manningham. I worked in a school which served the Mirapur, Pakistan community. So the middle school where I was the deputy head and acting head in the last year, had 600 children, most of them from Pakistan. And I really enjoyed being a Christian and living in that community, a faith community. But I really did feel that God was calling me out to start this school. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Let me contrast that a bit with the Indian system of education.
Yep.
Because I wanted a bit of clarity in why you did what you did.
Yep.
So back in India, when a Christian parent wants to send their kids to a school, they don't really bother about, and regardless of what religion is it, they don't get much bothered about which kind of school they are, whether it is run by Christian organization or it by a non-Christian organization, regardless of that.
Yeah.
Because there's a sense that the moral values embedded would be almost similar, although there won't be any particular Christian or non-Christian values for that sense. So if I send somebody to a non-Christian school back in India, I wouldn't be worried about any gender issues or individualistic issues, because back in India we are not haggling about whether there is a God or not. We are just haggling about which God is it. So when you thought of starting a Christian school, was it partly because if it's not from a non-Christian value perspective, the values were quite opposite?
Well, no education is neutral. Every school has its values. Every teacher has their values. Children spend 15,000 hours in school. I would imagine that your daughter will spend more time with their teacher than they do with you. And your teacher will shape them, perhaps not as much as you do, but will significantly rival you in their thoughts. And as I've said, I know there are many good schools in Bradford, many good teachers in Bradford, but I was seconded in my early career to a group that was putting together content of moral education, and one of the questions were, which lives shall we hold up in front of our children? And Band-Aid, Live Aid had just happened. We've just celebrated 40 years of it. I remembered when it was live, and so people said people like Bob Geldof and people like Gandhi and people like Martin Luther King, and I said, well, what about Jesus? And people just said no. And so even though you've got very good, committed teachers, it's the absence of God in a good secular school that sends a very strong message that God is irrelevant in the education of a child. And I didn't want that to be the case for our children. So I wanted our school to be as good as any of the other good schools in Bradford, but where it was comfortable to talk about Jesus, where Jesus is and the influence of the Bible on the West, the development of the West, and some of the great things that have been accomplished by Christians, as well as some of the bad examples of Christianity. So I wanted our children to grow up being discerning and able to realize that there is a heritage that belongs to them, that where Christians are relevant and have done good in the world. And so I wanted to provide an alternative, a place where the good things of God could be talked about, the issues of the world could be discussed within a Christian worldview. And so I wasn't reacting against what the world was teaching my children. It was the fact that God wasn't considered to be relevant. Now, this was in Bradford when multiculturalism was very strong. And so all sorts of peoples and faiths were being celebrated and acknowledged, but hardly a Christian faith. It just wasn't happening for me. I think nowadays parents are more concerned with some of the issues that are being promoted within schools. And so I understand a lot of Christians, parents are pulling their children out of education, state education, but not just Christian parents, all sorts of parents. There are in 2024, there were 111,000 children being home educated, which was up 20,000 on the year before. So there are more and more parents being concerned about what is being promoted in schools, and are looking for alternatives.
So, in terms of the society and the culture,
Yeah.
Let's say somebody is a new parent who has a kid who is just for 4 years and they're planning to start the education.
Yeah.
And assume somebody doesn't have either the means or wherewithal to send their kids to a Christian school.
Yeah.
Or they don't have any Christian school in their neighborhood where they could do that. So then how they should start approaching their parenting and their schooling, where they feel that they are able to instill those Christian values in their kids.
Well, of course, parents are children's first and most significant teachers. So, parents have the God-given authority, and you have to remember that, God gives authority to parents to bring these things, to bring their children up. So we shouldn't wait for a Christian school to do it, or we shouldn't expect the government to provide, free compulsory education for that to happen. Parents have got to really shape their children. And the Bible talks about, impress these things upon your children, talk about them as they go along the road. So when they see things happening, talk to them about what's happening around them, making sure that they provide an opportunity in home for children. I think you've got to pass on to children the things that really matter to you. And the Bible's is full of ways you can do that. If you look at Psalm 78, which is generational transfer, where a generation of parents have to pass on the good things of God. And so you've got to find a way to talk about God's word naturally, to pray naturally. You've got to, I think, discern what's going on in the world around you, not be off put by that. because for sure your children won't grow up being fearful of the generation they're growing up into. For them, it'll be life, it'll be excitement, and of course God has plans and purposes for every generation. Your child, my grandchildren, are part of Generation Alpha. I think parents need to understand Generation Alpha. So what are the opportunities and challenges that will face your generation? Talk to parents, similar parents. I know there's lots of networking between parents. Mums get together, dads get together. I would really say work hard on understanding and discerning what's going on around you. Most of your generation will be millennials. Work out what's characteristic about your generation. What kind of things are you going to intentionally do for your children? What experiences are you going to give them? For example, when our children were about 13, 14 and 12, we were trying to instill upon them values, and that Christmas is not all about money, it's not all about presents, it's not all about what you can get. And we said all the right things, but the message of the culture was so strong that it was not about those things. So we had a friend who ran an orphanage in Romania, in Bucharest. So in 1999, instead of putting our money into our children's presents, and instead of asking our family to buy presents, we said, can we put the money into airline tickets? And we went to Bucharest for Christmas, and on Christmas Day we went into an orphanage and we bathed and stimulated children, and our children saw that there is a difference in the world, and that yes, we are privileged, and yes, this is a materialistic society, but seeing a different life for different people their age really shaped them. So I think you've got to be really creative and intentional about what you expose your children to. Give them opportunities to serve, do things as a family that are Christian, and outreach to your neighbors, even if it's something like teaching your child to bake a cake for the person and the family that live next door. And I am a grandparent now, and I am surprised at how quickly life has gone, and you are parents for such short years. So you might have 10 years of really strong influence over your children, and then another 4 or 5 negotiated years of influence where your children are teenagers and can work with you or not. And in that time, give them your best time. And I know that's difficult. Parents have to work, but we quite often are too easily distracted from spending time with our children. Children, we do talk about quality time, but quality time comes out of quantity time. So you've got time, spend your money, invest in your children. So for example, one of my children was really struggling at school. They were struggling with their French. So we had a youth pastor who could speak French, who was American but was French speaking. So we paid Brian to teach our son French, but he said, I'll do it at tea time. Brian was single. So he said, I'll have him down over tea time. So we'll do an hour of French, but then I'll have tea with him and we'll talk about life, and I'll help him. I'll support him. So find those parents who are going to work with you. Find those people who are going to work with you. Support the people that work with your children in Sunday school. Have them around for tea. Care about them. The people that your children go to at school. Get to know your teachers. Support them. Be open with them. And just everything you've got, invest in that most important of jobs. We did all sorts of things with our children. Think about, who would you like your child to meet? What experience would you like your child to have? Well, if it's a wish list, how can you turn it into a to-do list so that you actively invest in those children? And you never know how your children are going to respond to the gospel. Children who grow up in Christian homes walk away and think, no, that's not for me. And children in Bradford Christian School who don't come from Christian homes, come from quite difficult homes, hear the gospel, really respond. And there's no guarantee that if you do all the right things, it's going to work. But make sure you do all the right things anyway. And you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be there and consistent and be real and love your children. Yeah.
Thank you so
and
much.
There's so many resources available nowadays. There's so much online. There's so many groups. So Generation Alpha, read the book, understand the possibilities that are available. Something like Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation. Read it, know what's coming against your children. Be informed.
I have heard about that book, The Anxious Generation.
Yeah, well, it's really good, and it just makes the point that the mental health crisis that my generation doesn't really get.
Even I don't get it.
But it coincides with between 2000 and 2015, when smartphones became available to teenagers, when their minds were transitioning and plastic, and very adversely affected by some of the, because as we all know, the phone companies know the psychology of how to get us hooked, how to get us addicted to phones, but of course it really damages within those years. So parents have got to understand what's coming against their kids, and they stand between the world, the enemy, and their children. And I would say the parents that work hardest at helping their children to discern and really explaining their values, explaining their boundaries and why they're in place. They may have more battles when the children are formative, but those children end up being aware of what's going on around them. The parents that just don't put anything in place and aren't informed and don't know what's coming against their children come unstuck.
So I just want to ask a follow-up question on that awareness or informed piece.
Yeah.
So, like, as you mentioned, you had a value system when you grew up.
Yeah.
I had one, and it is shifting all the time.
Yeah.
The values keeps changing. The signposts keep changing. Can you tell us few key major things which have changed from last 30, 40 years to now?
Yeah.
Just in a sense of awareness of parents be aware, because what I have seen or observed in one sense is that parents are not just aware of various things. So there are a couple of common themes, let's say gender identity or non-belief in God, which is there, or let's say everybody has a general sense that okay, social media is bad, but then they don't know much specifics about it. So there's a bit of general awareness, but not much for parents to tackle those issues, or let's say learn how to tackle these issues with their with their kids.
Yeah.
Could you tell us some of the cultural issues which has happened over some 30, 40 years?
Yeah. Well, when I was born in the late 1950s, when this country was nominally Christian. And so when I went to school, there were assemblies, lots of people went to church. There was generally a respect for church and our Christian culture and heritage. In the 1960s, and I think a bigger picture, and I'd really encourage parents to perhaps read about the big overarching changes in worldview. A book like The Universe Next Door by James Swire, now in its 5th edition, talks about how society has steadily, since the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, moved away from Christian thinking through deism, which didn't deny God but said that God was absent, like the clock worker that's just wound up the clock, and each generation works its way further and further away from God, and the gospel is no longer embedded in society. So in the 1960s, there was the Abortion Act. And since then, statistically, the most dangerous place for a child is in its mother's womb, because that's where most human beings lose their lives. In terms of sexuality, homosexuality was against the law. In the 1960s, that was changed. And though we're not discussing that issue now, because we have said that the Bible's teaching of sex within marriage between a man and a woman for life is no longer upheld even by law. So each generation works its way further from that. And so, now I understand, that there are issues of sexuality and gender that are genuine, but it's also popular or cool to experiment with sex outside of relationships that are marriage relationships, and to have sex with different genders. It's common to say that you can be who you want to be, and you can define who you are, and so you can have 20, 30, 40 numerous accounts of gender, because we've worked our way from a Christian understanding of what had gone for centuries as God's plan for people. Yeah. And so, because God now is seen as irrelevant, people make up what they want to be true. But isn't it interesting how currently you are getting people within Generation Z, people from 18 up to 30, who are saying, this is not working, this is empty, this is not good for me. And they are
Gen Z is turning to God.
They are looking for answers. Teenagers are saying there could be a God, but I think gender issues concerns parents, trans issues concern Christian parents, gay issues concern Christian parents, a lessening of Bible-based standards being normal, ordinary, accepted, and our children grow up hearing that so many things are ordinary, normal, permitted, because we've changed our laws. And I understand that laws are not there to tell you what's right and wrong. Laws are there to protect the vulnerable. And so, but the culture of our children doesn't have any of the characteristics of God current, which is why it's a spiritual wilderness, and that's where we're at now. And so I think you have got to, as parents, understand what's going to come against your children, and I think you've got to understand what's shaping your values as well. You see, I just have an understanding that your generation will understand the world much better than I, because you're much at the heart of the technological change that's happened. But I'm finding that your age of parents don't necessarily have that awareness and aren't necessarily working hard to understand what's going on. And maybe it's because I've lived through change, seen change come, seen how unheard of ideas have now become commonplace, and how quickly that happens. That we just have an urge to encourage your generation of parents to be more discerning of the world that your children are going to inherit.
No, that's so true, and I guess that's where our generation is a bit lacking.
Yeah.
But well said, and that is a great advice. Let me tell you an event. So a couple of days back, my daughter and my wife was playing together, and it's somehow she scratched my daughter's bit of head, forehead. And we had a band-aid. And then they were going out to church on Sunday morning, and then my wife asked, "What will you tell if somebody asks you what is this?" And then she told, "Oh, mom hit me." And we both got very scared. I'm like, and we were like, don't tell it in that sense, because it wasn't we hit you, and it was that we were playing and accidentally happened, because of how people interpret that event of mom hit you, and how the laws are against it in terms of disciplining your child. In India, we never had this. We still don't have that problem. I'm still scared of my mother for something. If she comes and hit me, I feel, in one sense, when I look back at my life, I'm like, thank God I got some of those hittings. I didn't like it at all when they happened. And I look back, like, thank God that happened, because that hadn't happened, God knows where I would have ended up. But we now here live in a time where disciplining a child outside home is impossible, but even inside home it has become such a terrifying thing that we really struggle to communicate to my daughter that if you tell it in that your mom hit me, that has a whole different connotation. And I know that BCS was involved in it when that regulation was passed. Now, with the reality being what it is, how do you, in practical ways, how can we discipline our children?
I think the days when a parent could use physical correction have and it be effective, and it not be abusive, and it be helpful, those days have gone. And what's politically correct and accepted is very different now. But I still think the basics of authority being kind of invested in the parent, and the parent learning how in relationship to correct, guide, and sometimes discipline children, because of course discipline is about consistency, it's about training, it's about explaining, it's within a context of love, and sometimes when it has to be punitive, I think parents can do it, and I think you can do it without using corporal discipline, but you have to be consistent and firm and fair and committed to helping, especially with younger children, to explain why they should make good choices, as Bradford Christian School does, and to talk about being gentle with your hands and to intervene quickly in the here and now. There's a great teaching in the Bible about children being arrows in the hands of a warrior, and of course the three parts of an arrow are the shaft, the feathers and the flights, and the arrowhead. And of course the part of the arrow that takes the most work is the shaft. And so when children are young, there's lots of involved consistent explaining of values and talking and communicating when children, respond appropriately and praising them within a context of love and punishment and guidance being part of that training. And there's lots of good techniques that are available that are sound and work. And of course, when teenagers are they need a different type of discipline, just as the flights of an arrow need a different type of more gentle, nuanced helping to keep an arrow flying straight. And of course, when you put an arrow out, what arrowhead are you going to put on it for whatever your job? So it's about having that independent, autonomous, self-contained adult in mind when you're finding it hard with your 2-year-old that's just defying you all the time. But it's and parents do it best. Parents are their first and best teachers, also their first and best shapers and guiders, and the children that come from home that are like that are a lot easier to work with in schools, because they already come with that respect for authority, fair, consistent and good authority, expressed by teachers. It builds on what parents are able to do. But it's not for the faint-hearted, is it?
No.
And you have to be on it all the time, even when you're tired, even when it's not convenient, even when it's you don't know what you're doing, you don't know how to do it. But just realize that your contemporaries are in the same boat. Ask, what do you do when she won't go to bed? What do you do when she throws the food? What will you do when he says no to you and he's 3?
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
In India, it's very different. So because you could still, at least from a parental perspective, you could punish or spank your kids.
Yeah.
From a school perspective, it is becoming less and less common.
Yeah.
More because parents don't want it.
No, and let's face it, lots of parents did it in anger, and it wasn't good, and wasn't godly, it wasn't effective. So can understand when there is so much abuse of children.
Yes.
You can understand the government saying, look, if we continue to allow parents to spank, then lots of children are going to get damaged and hurt, which is why you can understand why there is an outcry when parents would do that. And the parents that would do that well, their voice isn't heard anymore, and perhaps understandably why.
Sure, thank you for that. I guess no interviews now or no discussions are now devoid of AI.
Yep.
How that is so fastly changing almost all aspect of life. I could think of.
Yeah.
How do you see AI shaping education?
Well, I think like everything within our lifetimes that's been technological, there are really good aspects to the internet. There are really good aspects to how we can communicate, learn, study, be in touch with each other. So it's a really useful tool, isn't it, the internet? And I think AI will be the same. It will be really useful, really helpful. It will save time. It will help us to be efficient. It will help us to do things easier. Now, technology, though it makes things easier in terms of time, it doesn't make life easier. And of course, we can see that AI can be misused. We know, fake news is an issue. We know there's all sorts of complex human issues like ownership of creativity. And I guess we as Christians should be involved in that discussion. I mean, your podcasts that are seeking to address today's issues, we should not be reactive, throwing our hands up and retreating. We need to say, God is aware that AI would develop. I kind of think that we're getting near to the time, like in the Tower of Babel, when man said there's nothing that we're not going to be able to achieve. We're going to climb up and be as God. It's interesting to see how it will all end, but I just think we need to engage. In my generation, we said to children, don't do this, don't go to cinemas, don't play this music, don't go here, don't do that. I think nowadays, today's parents have got to teach their children to discern for themselves. And how hard is it with fake news and everything else that comes to make it difficult for us to know the truth? But I think we've just got to engage. So
there is a fake Keir Starmer video on internet.
Yeah.
The video is about not to be scammed.
Ironic.
Ironic.
Yeah.
It's so ironic. Almost at the end, I just wanted to have a few rapid fire personal questions, just for fun. If you had to meet one person in the past, whether it's from Bible or outside Bible, who that person would be?
Oh, I don't know. Someone who perhaps would kind of stimulate my faith would probably be someone like Martin Luther, who knocked his thesis to the door, not to rebel, but just to say, we should discuss these things. So that's all he was trying to do. It took him somewhere else. Probably him.
Oh, great. A book that has shaped your thinking a lot, apart from Bible?
Yeah, there's many books. And as a literature teacher, if you asked me every other month, it would probably be a different answer. I think the book that has most recently shaped my thinking was the book that shaped your world by Vishal Mangalwadi, who's an Indian scholar, who basically said, in the West, you think that you are the villains of the crime and of the scene, but he was actually saying the Bible has done so much good in the hands of committed, godly Christians. So that would be my latest book that I think I would recommend.
I only came to know him by chance, by a video, YouTube video, and that's when I kind of first heard about him. And he's written quite good books. So
you should read The Third Education Revolution, which is his latest book, which is either going to be consigned to nothing, but it could help Christians to realize that they can take hold of education in a new way because of all the technology that's available.
What do you do for fun apart from teaching
people? What do I do for fun? Well, I've got a season ticket for Bradford City, and my wife is a really good observer of football, so we go and watch football every other Saturday down at Bradford. I read, still read about 40 books a year, and now that I'm not constrained to being in a classroom in January, we will go to Morocco and take advantage of being able to travel and it not costing the earth.
Yeah, that's true. Just last one. If there is one message you want to give every parents, what it would be?
Your children's childhood will pass so quickly. Give everything you've got to invest in what matters to you in them, or else you might turn around one day and find that they are strangers to your faith.
Thank you. Phil, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This was super educative and in one sense eye-opening for me. So thank you so much for coming down. Be here on the Salt and Light podcast. I sincerely believe that this will help many parents just to clear their thoughts and get some sense of direction. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, what a rich and inspiring conversation that was with Mr. Moon. I am so grateful for the time he gave us and for his decades of faithful service in education and ministry. It is rare to meet someone who combines conviction, compassion, and clarity so naturally. If something in this episode resonated with you, maybe as a parent, a teacher, or someone just concerned about the next generation? Would you share this with a friend or leave a comment with your thoughts? Your feedback and your comments really helps us. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, let's be salt, let's be light.